So what are we going to talk about today?
You always ask that.
Well, you could ask me.
So, Kate, what are we going to talk about today?
Movie soundtracks! Yay!
Yay.
This is going to be really fun. Any opening remarks?
I know very little about music.
That is not true. She was a band kid.
So, I was terrible.
And you play multiple instruments even today, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I just play, okay? I don't know music. Like, I just listen to music. I just play it. I don't care about music theory. I don't care if something even sounds good half the time.
That doesn't mean you don't know about music.
Okay, I know how to play music. I know how to listen to music. I enjoy listening to music. But as far as having an analytical perspective on soundtracks, especially movie soundtracks, I can barely scratch the surface.
I don't think that matters. People around the world who don't read music or don't know anything, like people who can't even play music at all, still love movie soundtracks.
Well, of course, that's because music is the universal language.
Exactly. So don't worry about it. And if I do have a slightly more analytical perspective, then that's a balance.
Yeah.
Because if we both had the exact same perspective, that would be boring.
So before we started, you asked me if there were any like movies that I really like the soundtrack of. And of course, I had to say the classics like Dune, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter.
I don't remember.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
Oh, I love that one so much. And then I love musicals too, like Prince of Egypt. I love that movie so much.
Yep.
I could list all my favorite musicals right now, but that would take a while. And then that's also kind of different than just a movie soundtrack, right?
Yeah,
and then
you've got the words and yeah.
But then even like soundtracks themselves can be very different from one another. Like you take Dune, which is a soundtrack, but it's more of a soundscape. Like the music melds with the sounds and you're not sure where like the sound design starts and the music composition ends. Like it's all just all woven in there and it's so beautiful and I love it. It just adds to that immersion of the world, which is part of why I love that movie. The new Dune, I should specify. But I'm sure that one's great too. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
But then anyway, so you take that and then you compare it to Pirates of the Caribbean or Star Wars with such strong melodies that they just get stuck in your mind half the time. And those are definitely not part of any kind of soundscape or anything. You know, you don't hear blaster shots in time with the melody like as the bass drum or something. Like it's not like that. And it's still just as effective.
Yeah. So I started and I wrote down a list of some composers that I really remember. I'm a bit of a nerd just in general, but something that I am particularly nerdy and good at is remembering names, dates, categorizing things, I guess. Mm-hmm. And if I really like a movie, then I know who often. Sometimes if it's somebody famous, I remember who wrote the soundtrack and stuff for some more slightly obscure things, but I don't think there's anything particularly obscure on this list. Number one, of course, John Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of.
Definitely.
Can't prevent that.
You were saying something about him and the Harry Potter soundtrack the other day.
Yeah. So I went and looked it up after that. So he scored the first 3 Harry Potter films. The 4th was Patrick Doyle.
Oh, he's on your list.
He is. 3 of the other ones were Alexander Desplat, who I did not write down because I didn't know what he made other than that. And then there was another person who I can't remember who did either the 5th or the 6th. I think he did the 6th movie soundtrack. But I don't remember who that was. But I went and looked on the back of your DVDs.
Oh,
that's how I found this out.
Nice. The first 3 Harry Potter soundtracks are really, truly special. I think John Williams had a real bit of magic in creating them because you not only do you see the main themes repeated throughout the entire series, so like all the other composers took those and made them suited for their movies, but then they're just so iconic. Anytime you hear like someone playing a Harry Potter song, it's usually either one of something from the first 3 or it's one of the songs from the other movies that took from the first three. Exactly. And then is that Hedwig's theme?
Yes.
Yeah. That's probably the most
It's actually
iconic.
called Lumos, apparently.
Well, and the seventh one is called Hedwig's theme.
Well, on the back, if you go to the CD and you look it up, it says Lumos with an exclamation point in parentheses, Hedwig's theme.
Oh, interesting.
But everybody just thinks of it as the Harry Potter theme.
Well, yeah.
So anyway,
You've got that, and then you've got Star Wars, the Imperial March. I mean, just as iconic. People hear that and they instantly know what is happening and what it's from. I just think it's so cool how composers can take something like what John Williams did for the first three Harry Potters and then just build on that. And like I love all the Harry Potters. Like the seventh and eighth ones have such a good soundtrack for those movies. I've not listened to them without the movies, but for the movie itself, it is so fitting because it has that much darker tone than the first three, but it still takes those main themes and puts them in there. And so you're like, this is familiar, but this is also still new, but this is also darker because it is darker. So
I remember the soundtrack for Goblet of Fire being more atmospheric than the first three.
That's a good word.
Which was cool. Yeah. Next on the list, we have Hans Zimmer. And I mean,
Hans Zimmer.
Another classic. He scored the Dark Knight trilogy, which I recently watched for the first time. And there's nothing in there that I can particularly recall because I've only seen it, Although there was something in the third one that I was like, I know I've heard this particular piece somewhere else. This is a famous thing that I'm recognizing from this movie. So that was cool. So we were also talking about Pirates of the Caribbean. So most people immediately think of Hans Zimmer when they think of that, but he didn't score the first movie. It was, I need to look it up now.
That's news to me. I mean, yeah, that is such a good soundtrack. That's another one where whoever the composer of the first one was just really understood.
Klaus Badelt.
And
nobody's ever heard of him.
That's a shame because I feel like he really understood the silly whimsicalness of Pirates of the Caribbean while still having that nice pushing dark undertones, but it's still so fun.
And he created that theme, right? And like everybody now thinks of Hans Zimmer. And just with like looking at the Wikipedia page, apparently he frequently will collaborate with Hans Zimmer on stuff. So it was maybe sort of a team effort the whole way around, but his name is like on the back of the DVD case if you go and look at it.
Oh, that's cool.
And then Hans Zimmer did the others, and he of course used the themes, and I think the Pirates of the Caribbean theme is called "He's a Pirate."
Yes.
Yes.
And there's a lot of classic melodies from Pirates of the Caribbean, but they're all escaping my mind at the moment. I know this.
And that kind of happens like at the end of things sometimes, but I don't know which.
When I was in like the 8th grade in band, we played this whole Pirates of the Caribbean melody, and it really has like 3 or 4 strong melodies that when you hear it, you're like Pirates of the Caribbean, but not everyone just instantly remembers them. But as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh, I know exactly what that is. Yeah. So it has like 3 or 4 of those.
Yeah. But there's something about, going back to John Williams again, about just how they stick in your head. Because like, I'm sure I would recognize them, but I can only think of like those 2 that we just talked about right now when I think of Pirates of the Caribbean. And probably people who have seen the movies more than I have would have a different answer.
Let's see, is it the bum 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 bum?
Exactly. Yes. There's that one.
And they're all also kind of like a riff of each other, which is super cool. And but they're all so distinct.
They all have that kind of jig.
Yes.
Jig.
It's that sailory, like sea shanty almost esque.
Exactly. And that's just great. So we don't only want to talk about composers and their works. We want to talk about like the significance of soundtracks themselves. But I do want to start with going off this list because then it'll give us other things to talk about. So Joe Hisaishi, or however you say his name.
Never heard of him.
Japanese. He scored Studio Ghibli. So you introduced me to him.
Oh, okay. Hell's Moving Castle.
Yes.
Is such a good score.
Yeah, apparently he did most of the, if not all of the Studio Ghibli soundtracks.
That's amazing.
Which I haven't.
Spirited Away also has a fantastic soundtrack. Just beautiful music. It's so pretty. And it's elegant. Yes.
It's elegant and it's got this whimsy and I'm specifically thinking of Howl because I can't remember the others right now. I wonder if I'm sure he did things outside of working with Studio Ghibli, but I don't know what they would be.
Yeah.
That's what he's most famous for in my book. Harry Gregson Williams, another name that he's done a lot of movies, but the ones that's coming to mind now are the Narnia movies, which is also incredible music.
Yeah.
There's that one. There's a couple main themes that I remember from Narnia, but there's the. There's that one.
Music.
Yeah, it's so good. It's just so regal and majestic and triumphant. And one of those I think was probably Aslan's theme. Maybe that one.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe that was the main theme. But anyway, that's the one that's sticking in my mind. Even I haven't listened to the soundtrack or watched the movie for a long time.
Gosh, now I want to.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We should
So
listen
good.
to in the car on the way.
Yes.
On the way out or something. Wait, we drove in different cars.
Well, we could still do that.
Still do that.
Just separately.
And what else? I think did Harry Gregson Williams do Hunger Games? Who did Hunger Games?
See, I don't really remember the Hunger Games soundtrack, but sometimes that's a mark of a good soundtrack.
Yeah.
When you have such a high action drama, the soundtrack should just emphasize it and not take over. It could be argued that Star Wars or Harry Potter, there's certain themes that kind of take over, but for those, it works, right? Because of the story and the plot and the characters. But for the Hunger Games, I like, other than the whistle, there's no, oh, that's Hunger Games, right? It's all just this nice, subtle emphasis to the story, if I remember correctly. It's also been a while since I watched the movies.
No, I'm not seeing him on this list. Oh, he did some X-Men movies.
Oh, those are good. I don't remember the soundtracks, but I like the movies.
Yes. I've still only ever seen the first 3 X-Men movies.
That's
but
okay.
They're like the first X-Men movie is like one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. Like nothing can top that.
Tangent. So excited to see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine again in the new Deadpool.
I do not care about Deadpool, but I heard that was a thing.
I'm super excited for that.
And apparently, like, he said he was done playing Wolverine.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
But never mind.
Yeah.
This is probably going to be the last hurrah.
Probably.
Officially.
So that's a fun way to go. More fun than Logan, which I still need to watch.
Yeah, I haven't seen Logan either.
Terrible Marvel fan. Yep. Okay, who else is on your list? Before we get too sidetracked.
Howard Shore. Lord of the Rings.
Oh my gosh, yes. Did he also do The Hobbit?
I think he did. But I haven't looked that up properly.
Was it Howard Shore who wrote the Misty Mountain theme and the other song that the dwarves sing in Bilbo's house?
Probably.
I like those.
Yes. And the thing that I love about those movies is how they incorporate vocals a lot more than most other soundtracks do.
Yeah.
Not just in when the dwarves are singing and stuff like that, but just throughout. There's voices singing melodies and then there's, the end credits songs that I think most of them.
So pretty.
Yeah, I think all of them.
Enya saying May It Be. I love that. So pretty. It's very ethereal in that way that when I read the books, I mean, I did watch the movies first, so I had that disadvantage. But when I read the books, it's almost like that's what Middle Earth sounded like. You just hear elves singing off in the distance, or if you're walking by the mountains, you hear the distant sound of the dwarves. Like, that's amazing.
So it's in a different way than Hans Zimmer. Those were very atmospheric soundtracks as well, but more with like what's the soul of what's going on versus
what are you actually
the sounds of the sand gritting against whatever that's blending with the music that's happening in Dune, so
it's all so cool.
Yeah. It's kind of like the orcs theme and that one is in I go to the analytical side. It's in compound meter. No, it's not compound meter. It's in asymmetrical meter. It's in 5/4 because the way they walk is not normal.
Oh.
So he made, because they walk in this like unhuman, like off, like weird way, and so the music is in asymmetrical meter where it's da 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 da. And so you hear that and you're like, this sounds weird. This isn't balanced. Well, of course it's not. They're orcs. And it's just, if you look it up, you're going to notice it. But it's like, wow, that was just brilliant.
Yeah.
It sounds unbalanced and it sounds wrong.
Yeah.
Because
on purpose.
Orcs.
That's so cool.
I know. Isn't that awesome? I just love that so much.
Yeah. One of my favorite pieces of music probably ever is, I think it's called Concerning Hobbits. And it's just that light, bouncy Shire theme that's just so peaceful and beautiful. And it just like transports you into the Shire. And there's nothing about it. Like it's just so peaceful and innocent. That's the word. Yeah.
Yep.
I love that one.
Yeah. And I can hear that in my head right now as we are.
And then you also hear that repeated throughout the whole of the movies. Like, I think it's near the end of Return of the King when it's like Frodo and Sam. There's like hints of that melody in some of those parts with them.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
John Powell is next on my list. I know he's done quite a few things. He did the solo soundtrack, which I really enjoyed. And that one was a little more atmospheric than John Williams as well. He did utilize some John Williams themes. It's a very obscure thing, but in the scene where Han first sees the Millennium Falcon, which I think, because he's at Lando's and then he goes and when I was watching the movie, I didn't notice it, but listening to the soundtrack, it's like they go around the corner and they see the ship all the time and the music is just swelling and then you hear the Star Wars theme like repeated like really slowly, but it's like that. And it's that moment when this like historical moment, right? When he finds his ship.
So cool.
And it was like, wow. But John Powell, he utilized a lot of drums in that soundtrack. So it was a very different feel from, the other Star Wars, like 1 through 9 kind of soundtrack feeling. It worked for that movie because they weren't trying to be copycatty.
Yeah.
So it worked really well. I liked that movie. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
Danny Elfman. He has worked with Tim Burton a lot. Edward Scissorhands. I think, did he also do Elf? Because that would just be, I think he might have. I don't remember. Anyway, he does like the kind of spooky, but light but kind of sinister and very whimsical kind of soundtracks.
Now I want to hear Parts of the Caribbean done by Danny Elfman.
See, that's what would be so fun to play with. Like, what if you swapped them around? How would we think differently of this movie?
Because Edward Scissorhands, it has that whimsy, but it has that darkness, but it also has such sorrow.
And there's a fragility to it.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of emotion in that music.
Yeah.
Without that music, I mean, honestly, that movie would be very different. I don't think you would really understand the depth of the isolation that Edward Scissorhands himself went through, if not for that music when, I forget her name, when she comes into his house for that first time and is looking around and she finds him.
I've only seen that movie one time, but I remember.
I've only seen it twice, but yeah, it's memorable. It's definitely memorable.
Leonard Bernstein. He is not just a film composer. He also composed some more classical works. I believe he did West Side Story.
Oh.
So he did some more musical, the original West Side Story.
I love West Side Story.
Things like that, and I don't remember what else he made. I did cheat a little bit. I went online and to cue my memory and wrote down some names of like top 10 composers and stuff. But there were some people on there that I'd never heard of before, which I kind of feel bad about. Some of the older film composers from the 50s and the 70s, and not that the 70s is that old, but like some of those original. And this person was born in 1888 and scored some of the first ever movies. And it's like, wow, I don't know anything about that guy. And I didn't even write his name down. Yeah. But yeah, you can always tell with the old movie soundtracks. And that would be an interesting thing too, because sometimes I found old movie soundtracks can kind of take me out of it just because they sound so dated. Not that the music is bad, but something to do with the recording quality and the style and them using too many violins. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, this is an old movie.
Yeah. It was very much a certain style. Like you watch a lot of old movies and they have that old sound, not just because of the recording quality, but then you watch movies nowadays and I hesitate to say music has evolved, but I think people have understood how music can be used in different ways. Like it's not just a pretty song for this heartfelt moment. It's a tender, soft piano with a hint of viola that emphasizes this sorrowful, heartbreaking, loving, romantic moment or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just pretty because it's pretty there. Scary sounds here because it's scary there.
Yeah.
And I may be downplaying old music in movies way too much, but
I need to see more older movies.
But I do think there has been a certain evolution of the use of music in movies.
Yeah. That's if you viewers have any, if you are like, oh, you guys really need to hear this old movie soundtrack. It might change your opinion. Please, like, drop us a comment. Let us know, because we love music. We love movies. So we want our horizons to be expanded.
So I know you have a couple more names on your list, but I want to make sure we get to this question, and that is, in indie movies, a lot of times, as we have experienced and as we have seen in other indie movies, sometimes the soundtrack can be like the last thing on the list, right? It's the thing that a lot of us might not think about right away or prioritize even sometimes. Do you have any thoughts on that and why maybe we should prioritize soundtracks more in our indie movies?
Well, I think part of it comes down to resources and who you know or who you don't know, because you could Google and look up some person online and they might charge you like $5,000 to get them a soundtrack,
which is
or you might have your
it,
friend who's working very hard and is a music student but just isn't quite there yet. Or you might just decide to use music from other soundtracks because you're just going to put it on YouTube and it doesn't really matter. And I've done that before. I had so much fun doing that with my first 2 movies. I had so much fun doing that. I pulled from the Return of the Jedi Star Wars soundtrack for Little Lord Vader, and I just had so much fun putting all that together and deciding which theme was going to be for what character. And of course, I kept Darth Vader's theme, the Imperial March. I kept that for Vader because you can't not. But I swapped things around and made it really, really fun. So you can do that. I haven't watched any indie movies, I think, that, to my knowledge, have done that to the extent that I did at age 15.
That does get a little more complicated when you're going, for well-known themes in something that isn't like a spoof or satirical.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think I'll ever be able to do that again to the extent that I did at that age. And if you can just use something else and just, I'm just going to grab this song and put it up on YouTube, and I know that YouTube will flag it but not take it down type thing. It might be like, well, I'm just going to do that, because yes, there are film composers who work with indie folks, but we don't know about them as much because they're on the same level we are, and we only know who we know based on who we know. It's like very much I know this person because I know this person type world at this point in our level of filmmaking. So,
but it's also really cool because we do know some really amazing composers. I feel terrible, but the guy who composed the music for Suck, I forgot his name.
Samuel G.R. Morgan.
Thank you. Fantastic. I love that music. It fits so well for the movie.
The guy's a genius.
Yeah.
And he's making, like, we follow him on Instagram, right? Like, he makes so many soundtracks for so many movies from, like, he lives in England, I think, right? So international movies that go to festivals in France or whatever. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
So this guy's a big deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then who was the other guy that wrote the songs for Tatooine Trouble?
Scarlet War Yellow.
Goma.
Yeah.
I love that music. Yeah. The theme for Tatooine Trouble is beautiful. I love it. As some of you may have known, Tatooine Trouble is kind of the precursor to our show that we're developing, 29 Trouble, which we will have an awesome soundtrack for that.
The thing about Scarlet War Yellow is that he doesn't necessarily advertise that. He kind of, Skylar was the connection for him, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he and Skylar are good friends. So Skylar was like, hey, I know a guy who really likes Star Wars who writes music. I'll get you in touch.
That's so cool.
So, like, that's the only reason that happened, because before that, I was going to do what I did before, and I was going to pull from, actually, speaking of solo, I was going to pull from the solo soundtrack.
Yep.
Because I think that energy matched that movie. And it would have been great, but, like, custom soundtrack is like, like, I cried when I listened to that. I just, like, cried buckets of tears the first time he was like, okay, here's the first draft or whatever, pinned, pasted up with your first scene, and I just, like, cried. I was like, I wrote this for me.
Yeah. There's something so special about having a real custom soundtrack for your movie. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. And I think every movie needs a soundtrack. Even just little comedies, they need something. Like Not the Drama We Expected. That whole soundtrack was a collection of music from artists we know, a lot of them local.
Not the Drama We Expected in particular, because the other movies,
the other two, not really.
Royalty-free websites.
Yeah. But Not the Drama, because it was prom, we needed this epic prom playlist. And we had some trouble getting some of the files to play on the day of.
Didn't work for literally no reason.
So dumb. But we still had a lot of amazing epic music, and that became the soundtrack for this, right?
Yeah.
It became more of that Hans Zimmer-esque soundscape because we're utilizing
Motivated music.
thank you, I was just going to say that. Motivated music. We had this epic DJ setup.
Yes. That's the only reason that movie looks so good,
Yes.
lighting-wise, is
Yeah.
because of the DJ. And that's how we made other connections too, because he put it out online. Like, I know we mentioned this with our first episode with Robert, but
Mhm.
he like DM'd us, was like, "Hey, I saw your reel about looking for indie musicians. I'm an indie musician. Please use my music."
Yeah.
And then he remastered them for us just without us even asking. He spent
my God.
hours on it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, whoa,
Mhm.
that was before we even met him.
I know.
We met him after that filming of that.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Anyway.
Can I give a little spoiler about Isabel?
Yeah.
So speaking of Robert, right? For the Isabel project, which a lot of you podcast listeners know about because we came up with the idea in episode 3. We just shot it back in May.
Yep.
Yeah. It's going to follow more in terms of sound. It's going to be more of that soundscape. There's no underlying music that's going to persist the whole time, but there is like motivated music like we've done with our other movie, specifically from Hesher Katz. And I'm so excited because it's one of those songs. Well, I guess we're going to be using 3 of them, and they just fit so perfectly. Like it's almost like they were written for this movie.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And I'm so excited for that.
Yes. Oh, on the topic of movies that don't have music. So I watched one last year. It was Terror on the Prairie.
Oh, yeah.
There's no music in that entire movie
Whoa.
until the end. It's kind of like the end scene leading into the credits. It's like a vocalist and like a guitar or something like that. It's very simple, very stripped down, but it works.
Yeah.
Like the soundscape of that movie, you've got the swirling winds and the blizzards and the crackling of a fire and like the sound, like
The
and
soundscape
with the
of it.
intensity
Yeah.
of what's happening story-wise, you're not even like, oh, something's missing here. At least I
Yeah.
wasn't.
Well, and that's the beauty, like again with Dune, Hans Zimmer, like I know I said it earlier, like every movie needs a soundtrack, but that can be the soundtrack. You need that sound. You need the persistent wind emphasizing the lonely coldness of this scene or something like that. I think what I was referring to earlier with like you need a soundtrack is like it's like when you have a scene and they're just like talking like us and there's no music there's no sound there. There's maybe like, a bump on the table or whatever every now and then. Like
Yeah.
that's boring.
But again, not overutilizing music. And that's
Mhm.
when it comes down to, I mean, A, having a brilliant composer, but B, a director who is sensitive and wise enough to know or to be like, hey, I want this to just, this is going to focus on the actors, and the actors are going to bring that, push it over the edge of being amazing,
Yep.
That's a clunky way to say that.
Makes sense to me. I don't know if it made sense to you.
Okay. Oh, that's another thing. Any other movies that don't have a traditional soundtrack that you would recommend? Because Terror on the Prairie is the only one that's coming to my mind. That one was excellent. So
Yeah, I've not seen that. Otherwise, I would have more comments about it.
Yeah. I think you would like it.
Oh, I have
It's
no
good.
doubt. Do you have any final thoughts on soundtracks, composers? I know we didn't quite finish your list. Do you have any thoughts on those?
Well,
before
a
we go?
couple of the last ones were Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz.
Mm.
Alan Menken has, I don't know to what extent, I feel like there was a collaborator, but some of the classic, of the slightly newer Disney movies, he wrote the music and the
Yeah.
songs for those.
Did he do Aladdin?
I don't know.
I think he did.
Probably.
I love
probably.
the Aladdin soundtrack.
Yeah, I know he
Yeah.
did Tangled as well.
That's also a really
Great.
good one.
Yeah. So he's done a lot, and that's its own style as well.
Mhm.
The Disney, the
Yeah.
classic Disney sound.
It has that
and
much
song.
lighter magic
Yeah.
about it. But it's still so heartfelt and real. Like I sing
Yep.
Disney songs all the time, and most of them
They're
are probably
good.
Alan Menken or Phil Collins. Love Phil
yeah.
Collins. Tarzan, the best.
I haven't seen Tarzan.
What? I did
haven't.
not know this.
I saw part of it one time, but I didn't get a chance to
We're
finish it.
gonna change that because
Okay.
I love that movie. It's probably one of my top 3 Disney movies.
All I really remember is when he meets the girl and he's like poking her, and it's really awkward. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what? This is a children's movie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm totally down to watch the whole thing. Good. There's a lot of classic Disney movies that I have yet to see.
Up. I love Up. The soundtrack makes me cry.
I don't know who made the soundtrack for that.
Just look it up.
Michael Giacchino. Giacchino? It's Italian. I should know how to pronounce that. Giacchino.
I have no
Giacchino.
I may be part Italian, but I don't know how to pronounce Italian words. What was the other guy? Steven
Schwartz. He wrote this. So Hans Zimmer wrote the music, and then I think Steven Schwartz wrote the lyrics and maybe the melodies of the lyrics for Prince of Egypt.
Oh.
He also wrote, and I'm not super into musicals, or I don't know. I haven't seen a whole bunch of them. I like them, but it doesn't
change that.
Yes, but Wicked. He wrote the music for Wicked, which I am a little more familiar with.
Yeah.
And that one is super good as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Steven Schwartz and Hans Zimmer were the dynamic duo behind Prince of Egypt, which is
wonder.
I know.
That's oh my gosh. Like that soundtrack, that music is incredible.
Yeah. There was a TikTok I saw once of this guy and he's like, "Hey," and he's pretending, he's being like the execs like, "Hey, we want to hire you to make this soundtrack for this little god movie." And
little god.
And then they're listening to, and they're like, and the guy's like brain is exploding, and he's like, "You guys pulled out all the stops, and this is only the first scene."
Honestly, that first scene,
like "Deliver Us," it's probably the most famous song.
When You Believe by Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey.
Well, that's true, but yeah, like "Deliver Us" is what I think of when, and like I still cry every time I hear it.
Mm-hmm. Through Heaven's Eyes is one of my favorites.
Oh my gosh, yes, they just had such a great cast for that. So many amazing singers, amazing actors.
I think it's the burning bush part. They were gonna have, I think, every single cast member and extras and everything they could possibly pull to all speak as the voice of God in that part. But then I think when Val Kilmer went to record, they were like, "Oh no, his voice needs to be a little more prominent than the others." And so they did that, and it's magical. Oh my gosh. It sounds like the voice of God.
Yeah, because I believe they didn't want to have we want to credit one person as
Right.
God because that just looks awful.
Not just that, but it doesn't sound like
And
God.
it doesn't sound
right.
like that. Yeah. So just having that epic vastness.
Yeah. The creative team behind that project was just on fire. Like the bush, just on fire. I like to think that God is a big fan of that movie.
I think so. I think it brought him great glory.
Yeah.
And that's the only movie I've ever seen that the first thing you see after the opening logos or whatever is this little, not disclaimer thing, but this little statement from the producers or whoever about how we did our best to honor, the legacy of what this means. And because this is important to various religions and we wanted to do our best to honor all of that and be worthy of that, essentially.
Yeah.
I've never seen that anywhere else. It's
I don't even remember that in the
they
movie.
they didn't even need to put that in there, but they made this statement. It's like, wow, thank you. Because they totally could have cheapened it, but they didn't. And it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool.
Yeah. Now I want to watch that one again.
Me too.
Go watch Prince of Egypt again.
As we will.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's it.
Leave us your favorite soundtracks in the comments or shout us out on Instagram or TikTok, Twitter, whatever other platform we're on. Thanks so much for watching and listening to our ramblings about music and soundtracks. It's been great.
We like music.
Yeah.
We like soundtracks.
Yeah. All right, do your subscribe thing, whatever you do on this platform. And thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.